So what's going on guys, Kate is here and welcome back to a brand new video. For today I will show you the best Shadowhunter PVE build in Lost Ark. So in this guide I will show you what abilities and awakening skill you want to get. Then I will explain what are the best engravings, gems and cards to use for endgame content. And then lastly I will show you the best gameplay and even which stats you need to allocate for PVE, so you would be able to get the best results and highest damage possible and much more. So no matter how low or high level or gear score your character is, you can easily use this build and follow the step-by-step guide. So if this sounds interesting to you, then let's get right into it. So the Shadowhunter has small AoE skills, but she compensates for that with low cooldowns and high mobility. She is one of the few transformation classes in Lost Ark, with her demonic identity. That means that when this bar is at full, you can activate the demonic mode and become a different creature with different abilities. This adds a lot more mobility and more variety to the playstyle. But for our endgame build, we will be using the perfect suppression engraving, which will disable this demonic mode, and in return you will get 30% more damage increase and a plus 50% faster meter gain, which will improve our human form skills for the highest damage possible and much more. So if you are looking for the best leveling, raiding, chaos dungeon or any other PvE content build, then this is the one for you. Okay, so now let's move over to the build itself, and these are the skills you want to have. So for the first ability we have the demonic slash, and we use this time just 4 levels to unlock the excellent mobility. Then for your gems you don't want to select anything, and then lastly for your rune you want to get the quick recharge. Then for the second ability we have the rising claw, and we use 4 more levels to select the naively honest. Then for your gems you again don't want to select anything, and then lastly for your rune you want to get the gale wind. Then for the next one we have the howl ability, and we use 10 levels to unlock the quick preparation, encroaching power and scream of fury. Then for your gems you want to get the cooldown reduction gem, and then lastly for your rune you want to get the wealth. Then for the fourth ability we have the cruel cutter, and we use 10 more levels to select the magic amplification, earth attack and encroaching release. Then for your gems you want to get both types, so one for cooldown reduction and the second one for damage increase. And then lastly for your rune you want to get the overwhelm. Then for the next one we have the trust impact ability, and we use once again 10 levels to unlock the swift trust, deep trust and spectral explosion. Then for your gems you again want to get both types, so the first one is for cooldown reduction and the second one is for damage increase. And then lastly for your rune you want to get the overwhelm. So then for one of the last abilities we have the demolition, and we use 10 levels to select the weak point detection, wave attack and encroaching release. Then for your gems you want to get both types, so one for cooldown reduction and the second one for damage increase. And then lastly for your rune you want to get the gale wind. Then for the 7th ability we have the decimate, and we use 10 levels to unlock the quick preparation, weak point detection and cruel hand. Then for your gems you want to get both types, so one for cooldown reduction and the second one for damage increase. And then lastly for your rune you want to get the wealth. And then for the last and final ability we have the sharpened cut, and we use our last 4 levels to select the enhanced slash. Then for your gems you again want to get both types, and then lastly for your rune you want to get the gale wind. Then as well after level 50 for your awakening skill you want to get the gates of eruption. But if you haven't reached level 50 yet, then here's a specific guide on which abilities you should upgrade first while leveling with the Shadowhunter. And then on top of all this, try to focus on equipping as high item level gear as you can. And then at the end game you should have 1250 crit and 350 swiftness. But again, if you haven't reached this point yet, then try to have around 70% stats into crit and 30% stats into swiftness. Okay, so then the way I would recommend to upgrade this build is at level 50, you will get around 250 points. So this is how your build should look like. But then by doing more and more endgame content you will get more points. And at the absolute endgame, this is how your build should look like with all the 410 skill points. So at the start you use the 252 point build, and then by leveling up and completing quests you will get more points. So just keep on improving your skills and getting higher tier runes and gems as well. So then let's move over to the engravings, and you want to get the perfect suppression. And I would recommend to keep this engraving at level 1 for the tier 1 content, because the efficiency of higher levels will only give you plus 5% additional damage. This engraving also makes up for the lack of specialization in our build, because it will increase your Shadow Burst meter generation by 50% at all levels. Then the second engraving is called the Master of Ambush, and this is a great engraving that synergizes very well with the Shadowhunter, as you should be always trying to hit the enemies with the back attacks, so this will be a really good damage increase. Then the next one is called the Keen Blunt Weapon, and because our build has so much crit stats, getting increased crit damage will come very handy to increase our overall damage. Then for the fourth engraving, you want to get the Adrenaline, and this engraving provides a additional source of crit and attack power. This is a great engraving because we have low cooldown, so you can easily upkeep the stacks. Then the next one is called the Grudge, and this is more advanced engraving that is recommended for tier 3 content. This Grudge is the most efficient engraving against mobs, and you will get your damage increased, but in return you will take 20% more damage. So when you get to the very endgame content, which is called the tier 3, then get this engraving. And before using it, get it to at least level 2, because at level 1 this engraving is not that efficient. And then for the last one, we have the Cursed Doll, and this is a significant attack power increase at the cost of 25% healing penalty. This penalty can be offset by paying more attention on dodging red AoE circles and by using healing potions more often. So then in my summary, I would recommend to get the top 3 engravings first and then the bottom 3. And then last but not the least, let's move over to your cards, and you want to get the Armin, Syria, Solus, King Tyrain, Carmen, and Delane Armin. In general, these cards are an endgame system for maximizing your character, so you don't have to get them right away, but these specific cards will optimize your damage output in PvE even more. I did bunch of testing for this build, and this was the best and most optimized card set. Okay, so then moving over to the gameplay, and if you have played this class while leveling, you will be very familiar with the skills, so I will just try to give you a short description. So then for the first 2 abilities, we have the Demonic Slash and Sharpened Cut, and these are your main 2 gap closer skills. Both abilities will deal bunch of damage and make your character dash forwards for better mobility. Then the second ability is called the Rising Claw, and this is your one and only counter attack skill. Then the next ability is called the Howl, and this is your biggest shadow burst generator that most importantly applies a 30% increased damage buff for your entire party. Then the next 3 abilities are called Decimate, Thrust Impact, and Sharpened Cut, and these are your main 3 burst damage skills that also generate a lot of shadow burst meter. Then for the last 2 abilities, we have the Cruel Cutter and Demolition, and these are your main skills that you want to use when the shadow burst meter is at least at 40%. When you fill this meter up, you can activate it like any other Shadowhunter class, but instead of transforming into a demon, you will consume 20% meter to use each ability, and this will perform the ability and increase our overall damage. And then lastly, our Awakening skill is called the Gates of Eruption, and this is your only available Awakening skill, because we are using the Perfect Suppression engraving, which disables our demon form. Regardless, this ability is still very high damage, that when you activate it, it will unleash a energy that will inflict a lot of damage, and then at the end, all of the energies will explode and do massive amounts of AoE damage. I usually recommend to use this skill very early on in the fight, because you can get easy damage numbers, and this will help you to fill up your meter super quickly. Okay, so then let's take a closer look at your best skill rotation, and most importantly, we always want to be behind the enemy to increase our damage. And I always use my Gates of Eruption Awakening skill at the beginning of the fight. This helps you to generate enough Shadow Burst meter to last the entire fight, especially if you land all of your skills with no cooldown modifiers. So then the highest damage rotation is to first of all use the Howl ability, then the Cruel Cutter, then the Thrust Impact, then Decimate, then Sharpened Cut, and then finish it off with the Demolition skill. So let's see what we did in this rotation. First of all, we used the Howl ability to increase our damage by 30%, and then we used our main damage skills. The Perfect Suppression builds have a straightforward playstyle. They generate enough Shadow Burst meter to then unload all 6 human form skills in this specific order. So then if this is done correctly and all of your skills hit, you will never run out of the Shadow Burst meter and you will have a consistent super high DPS. And then for the last 2 abilities, I either way save them for counter attacks, or you can just use them right after the rotation ends. So now in my last and final conclusions for this build. The Perfect Suppression Shadowhunters spend their Shadow Burst meter to deal extra damage with their spender skills called the Cruel Cutter and Demolition. Each skill will cost about 20% of the meter, but if you use all of your skills one after another one in the correct order I showed you, you will never run out of the Shadow Burst meter. Then as well, don't forget to always cast your Awakening skill called the the Gates of Eruption at the beginning of the fight, so that you can generate the necessary amount of Shadow Burst meter for your special skills. And then lastly, remember that this build's priority is to get as much high crit stats as possible, so you would be able to get the highest damage numbers, and that's about it. So I really do appreciate everyone for watching, guys, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any suggestions, feedback, or other good Lost Ark PVE classes that you would like to see in the next video, then feel free to leave your comments in the comment section down below. And while you're doing that, please click like, subscribe, and enable that notification bell, so this way you could support the channel and you won't miss any more amazing content from me. With all this said, you have an amazing day, and I'll catch you in my next video. So take it easy, peace.